In the distant corners of the galaxy, two great forces, the Thrax Empire and the Lyrian Federation, clashed in a war that had been raging for centuries. Their battles endless, the casualties unimaginable. Each side believed they were the rightful rulers of the galaxy, fighting for resources in the vast star systems that lay scattered like jewels among the cold expanse of space. But despite their immense power, neither side could claim ultimate victory. The war became a cycle of destruction and rebirth, each faction pushing the other to the brink of annihilation, yet neither ever giving up, both holding on to the illusion of dominance. For the galaxy, the war had become a terrifying norm, a constant hum in the background of every life across the universe. But among the stars, no one had truly expected anything to change or anything new to emerge until a faint signal was detected. A ship unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, an unregistered vessel with no known origin or affiliation. It was the Vanguard, humanity's first step into a galaxy that had forgotten their existence long ago. The signal sparked a quiet unease among the Lyrian and Thrax leaders, neither side knowing what to make of it. Some dismissed it as a fluke, some assumed it was a lone ship lost in the vastness of space. But the truth was more chilling, far more unsettling. Humanity had been watching, waiting for the moment when they would enter this galaxy, and when the time came, they would not be passive observers. They would not be pushed around by those who had long believed themselves the galaxy's rulers. No, humanity would bring a force no one could ignore and no one could control. The Vanguard drifted silently through the void of space, its massive hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. It was an impressive sight, a ship built not for subtlety, but for power, its sleek design almost alien in its simplicity, but with weapons and technology beyond anything the galaxy had seen. The Thrax and Lyrian factions had been at war for so long they had lost sight of how fragile their position was. They had come to believe their empires would rule forever, their war machines unchallenged, their fleets unstoppable. And so when the Vanguard appeared in the galaxy's central sector, it was not immediately recognized for the threat it posed. It was a single human ship, no bigger than the average destroyer, and yet it radiated an unfamiliar energy that both alien factions couldn't quite understand. Their first response was to ignore it, dismissing it as nothing more than an anomaly, something that wouldn't disrupt the status quo. The Vanguard had no allegiance, no known origin, no reason to be there, yet its presence was undeniable. As it moved deeper into contested space, it encountered a small pirate fleet the Thrax Empire had been using as a distraction for an ongoing raid on Lyrian outposts. The pirates were barely a nuisance to the Thrax forces, but when they turned their sights on the Vanguard, they realized too late that they had underestimated what they faced. The pirates opened fire, believing it to be another weak target, but the Vanguard responded with speed and accuracy. The ship's energy shields absorbed the first blast, then retaliated with a single shot that obliterated a pirate ship entirely with a precision that left the surviving fleet members frozen in shock. The Vanguard moved like lightning between the remaining ships, cutting them down with expert precision. Each strike calculated, no wasted energy, no mercy shown. In minutes, the pirate fleet was nothing but debris. Floating in space, the Thrax and Lyrian fleets watched from afar, unsure of what to do. They had never seen such devastating efficiency from a single ship. Even the mightiest of their war machines paled in comparison to the quiet wrath of humanity's first representative in the galaxy. The destruction of the pirate fleet spread like wildfire across the galaxy. News of the Vanguard's overwhelming power reached both Thrax and Lyrian command centers. Quickly, they could not deny what had just occurred. This was no ordinary ship. This was something else entirely, and the implications were far too dangerous to ignore. The Thrax Empire's Supreme General Galactic ordered an immediate investigation into the ship's origins. His mind raced with the possibilities. Humans were an unknown quantity in the galaxy. They had long been considered primitive by all who had encountered them. Their technology barely rivaled the smallest of spacefaring races. So how could they possess such a formidable warship? It didn't make sense. Meanwhile, the Lyrian Federation was equally unnerved. Their intelligence officers scrambled to collect any information they could find, But all efforts came up empty. There was no record of human ships in the galaxy, no sign of their fleets, no communication from their homeworld, nothing. And yet here they were in the heart of a war neither side had ever expected them to enter. Admiral Aidan Clark, commander of the Vanguard, sat in his ship's command center calm and resolute despite the storm of questions swirling around him. The crew of the Vanguard had come a long way from their homeworld Earth, and they were not about to let the galaxy tear itself apart. Without intervention, Clark had no intentions of joining the war between the Thrax and the Lurians, but he knew one thing for certain: if this galaxy was going to survive, it needed a voice that wasn't ruled by endless conflict. Humanity would be that voice. Humanity would make sure the war didn't spread any further, and if the Thrax or the Lurians refused to listen, then they would be shown the power of a force they had never imagined. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of something far greater, the power of a species that had been forgotten and underestimated, but now was ready to make its mark. Clark's decision was clear: he would not fight for either side, but he would fight to end the war before it consumed everything in its path. The galaxy had no idea what it had just unleashed, but it would soon find out just how wrong it was to assume humanity would remain on the sidelines forever. The Lurian Federation couldn't afford to ignore the Vanguard any longer. General Mirasolis, a veteran strategist and ambitious leader, saw an opportunity. She wasn't going to waste. The Lurian Council had tried to dismiss the human ship as an anomaly, but Solis knew better. She understood that if the humans were allowed to remain uninvolved, the balance of power in the galaxy could shift dramatically. She sent a private transmission to Admiral Clark of the Vanguard, offering a proposition she knew would appeal to him. The Lurian Federation needed help. They weren't asking for a full-fledged alliance, not yet, but the Thrax Empire had grown far too strong in the ongoing war. Their forces were overwhelming every resistance, and the Federation needed a counterbalance, one that could tip the scales in their favor. In exchange for humanity's intervention, Solis promised Clark that they would share intelligence on the Thrax movements and resources to help the Vanguard remain undetected in their operations. She presented it as a way for the humans to control the flow of the war, to ensure peace could be reached with an upper hand over the Thrax Empire. Clark was not convinced. His refusal was simple: "We're not here to fight your war," he stated clearly. But Solis pressed on, insisting that humanity's power could reshape the galaxy's future. She hinted at the untapped resources that could be found in the star system the Thrax were about to conquer. With humanity's help, the Federation could make a move that would destabilize the Thrax Empire and force them to negotiate for peace. The offer seemed tempting. The Lurian Federation was powerful, but it was struggling against the Thrax. Mike Clark was silent for a long time as Solis awaited his decision. She knew he would come to see the wisdom of her proposal, but the Vanguard remained steadfast in its independence. Humanity had no interest in taking sides. Solis grew frustrated. Time was running out, and the longer the Vanguard remained neutral, the greater the chance of losing the war. She knew that Clark's refusal could signal a shift toward conflict between their two forces. Her desperation grew as she made one final plea: "Join us, and you will be the deciding force that saves the galaxy from total ruin, or stay out and watch it burn." But Clark's response was final: "The war between your people is not mine to fight, and humanity will not be used as a weapon of either side." The transmission from Solis had barely ended when the Vanguard's crew began to feel the tension mounting within the command center. Admiral Clark stood by the viewports, staring into the vastness of space, as if the answer to what he would do next lay within the stars. The offer from the Lurian Federation had been tempting in some ways, but the risk of being dragged into the war was something Clark knew could not be taken lightly. He had seen the destruction and despair that war had caused in other parts of the galaxy, and humanity would not be the catalyst for another endless conflict. Clark turned from the viewport, his face stern as he addressed his officers. This was not the path they had chosen. The Vanguard was here to watch and observe, not to intervene. But now the pressure was mounting, and Solis' desperation had planted seeds of doubt in his mind. Could they afford to ignore the suffering of the galaxy? Was it their responsibility to step in when others were failing? The ship's communication officer, Lieutenant Shaw, spoke up, breaking the silence. "Admiral, I'm picking up another transmission, this time from the Thrax Empire. It seems they've made a counteroffer." Clark's expression remained unchanged as he walked over to the console. The Thrax Empire's proposal was as calculated as it was ruthless. They'd promised the humans access to a wealth of resources and military support if they agreed to help eliminate the Lurian threat and secure the Thrax's hold on the galaxy. Clark read through the message, his fingers tightening around the console. It was clear that the Thrax were doing everything they could to bait humanity into becoming a key player in their war. They didn't care about peace. They didn't care about the galaxy's future. They cared only about crushing the Lurians and maintaining their reign of terror. Clark's resolve hardened. The Thrax Empire had underestimated humanity. If they thought they could manipulate the humans into becoming another pawn in their war, they were gravely mistaken. The vanguard would not be used by anyone, not the Lurians, not the Thrax, no one. Clark turned to his crew. Their mission had just become more complicated than ever. The vanguard was not just a ship anymore. It was a symbol of defiance in a galaxy on the brink of collapse. They would stand against both the Thrax and the Lurians, if necessary, but they would not fight their war for them. Not now, not ever. Humanity would not be coerced or controlled. The decision was made, but the consequences were immediate and dangerous. As soon as Clark issued the order to ignore the offers from both the Lurian Federation and the Thrax Empire, the tension within the vanguard grew palpable. Every officer knew what was coming the moment the ship had entered galactic space. They had become a symbol of something far larger than themselves. It was no longer just a ship or a crew. It was a statement. Humanity was here, and they would not bend to the will of others. The Thrax and Lurian empires had been at war for so long that they had begun to believe no one could challenge their dominance. But the vanguard had done more than just destroy a pirate fleet. It had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. And now the two factions saw humanity not as an ally, but as a threat. The first of many attacks came in waves. The Thrax began sending smaller assault groups to harass the vanguard, hoping to provoke the humans into responding aggressively. They were testing their strength, hoping to break Clark's resolve. But the humans did not take the bait. Each skirmish was over before it could even begin. The vanguard's weapon systems were unmatched. The aliens were forced to retreat with their tails between their legs, leaving behind nothing but wreckage and frustration. The Lurian Federation, however, took a different approach. They sought to form a secret alliance with the pirates who had been crushed by the vanguard, hoping to turn the situation to their advantage. They reasoned that if they couldn't defeat the humans in open battle, they would have to go underground and attack them from the shadows. The Lurians made covert deals with various factions, promising them support in exchange for sabotaging the vanguard. But Clark's crew was no stranger to such tactics. The moment any threat appeared, they eliminated it with cold precision. The vanguard moved like a ghost through the galaxy, striking down every ambush. Before it could even gather momentum, the Lurian attempt to destabilize them fell flat. The Thrax Empire, frustrated with their failure to provoke the humans, decided on a more direct course. They launched a full-scale offensive, sending dozens of warships toward the vanguard, hoping to force Clark's hand. This time, they wouldn't back down. But neither would humanity. Clark's message was clear: if you want war, we will show you war. But if you seek peace, then you will find us standing in the way of your bloodshed. And the galaxy was about to see just how far humanity was willing to go to defend its freedom and its principles. The Thrax offensive was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The mighty warships poured into the sector. Like an unstoppable tide, they filled the space around the vanguard, blocking every escape route and cutting off all avenues for retreat. Clark knew this moment was coming, but even he couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision to stand his ground. It wasn't just his life or the lives of his crew at stake. The entire galaxy was watching them, and the choices made in the coming hours would decide whether the war would continue or finally come to an end. The Thrax fleet's guns powered up one by one, and their command ship opened fire first. The blast hit the vanguard with a force that rocked the entire ship. Alarms blared across the bridge. But Clark stood still, his eyes locked onto the display as his crew quickly began to assess the damage. Shields are holding steady, Captain, the weapons officer reported. We're in this for the long haul. Clark's mind raced through calculations. He knew the Thrax would be relentless, and they would push harder with each attack. But he also knew the Vanguard had one advantage. They didn't expect the ship's firepower was immense, far beyond anything the Thrax had encountered, and its crew was more than ready to use it to its fullest potential. The first barrage from the Vanguard hit the lead Thrax ship head-on. Its shields collapsed in an instant, and the ship was torn apart in a flash of light debris, scattered in all directions. The Thrax fleet hesitated for a moment, as the loss of their flagship sent shockwaves through their ranks. But they quickly regained their resolve, sending wave after wave of fighters to swarm the Vanguard. The human ship cut through them effortlessly, as the crew moved with synchronized precision, each blast from their weapons finding its mark. No mercy, no hesitation. Every shot counted. Clark watched the battle unfold, his mind laser-focused on the strategy, but his heart remained resolute. This was not a fight for conquest. This was a fight for survival. The Thrax would either learn to respect humanity, or they would be crushed under the weight of their own arrogance. The battle raged on, but Clark knew one thing for certain: humanity had shown up, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson they were teaching. Not today, not ever. The Thrax had miscalculated. They had underestimated the strength of a species that would never bow to anyone, and the Vanguard was just getting started. The battle continued to rage around the Vanguard as the Thrax launched wave after wave of attacks, their ships descending like locusts to overwhelm the human vessel. But the Vanguard was a machine of unparalleled efficiency. Each shot was fired with deadly precision, and each attack was met with an equally swift and brutal response. Clark stood at the center of the command bridge, his face calm, but every decision he made weighed heavily on him. The Thrax might outnumber them, but they had underestimated what humanity was capable of. The battle was not about winning, it was about sending a message to the galaxy, a message that the war between the Thrax and the Lurians would not spill any further. The Thrax were powerful, but humanity was different. They didn't fight for glory, they didn't fight for power. They fought because they had learned long ago that peace could only be won through sacrifice. Clark's voice echoed through the bridge. Orders were given without hesitation. The Vanguard maneuvered through the chaos like a predator hunting its prey. Each blow dealt was a reminder that humanity would not be intimidated by numbers. The Thrax ships began to fall, their numbers dwindling, but still they pressed on. Their desperation growing as their once invincible fleet started to crumble under the might of a single ship. The tide had turned, and the Thrax had no choice but to adapt or lose everything. Their leaders watched in disbelief as the Vanguard carved a path of destruction through their fleet. They couldn't fathom how a single human ship could do this much damage, how they could face such overwhelming odds and still emerge victorious. Admiral Call of the Thrax Empire knew the time had come to make a choice. They could continue to fight and risk everything, or they could pull back and negotiate. But the pride of the Thrax would not allow them to retreat without a fight. Call ordered his remaining ships to form a blockade, hoping to starve the Vanguard into submission. The human ship moved with grace and fury, breaking through their lines without hesitation. The Thrax could not match the speed or the precision of the Vanguard, and they began to realize too late that their empire could not stand against this new power. But Clark knew the true test was not in victory or defeat. It was in whether the galaxy would finally see that the war needed to end, and that peace could only be achieved through unity. As the final remnants of the Thrax fleet were scattered in the wake of the Vanguard's relentless assault, Clark stood at the bridge watching the debris of the battle drift away. The cold silence of space was deafening as the once proud warships of the Thrax Empire floated broken and lifeless around the Vanguard. The crew was silent. Their mission had been accomplished, but the cost was still too high. They had shown the galaxy the power humanity held, but it was clear that this would not be the end of their struggle. Clark knew that the Thrax would not give up easily, but he also knew that the galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity had shown that it was not to be underestimated, and that it would not be used by anyone as a tool in their war. But the real question remained: would this be enough to bring peace, or would it only fuel the fires of further conflict? Clark's mind was already turning to the next steps. Even as his crew celebrated the victory, the Vanguard had destroyed the Thrax's offensive force. But the war was far from over. The Lyrian Federation had watched everything unfold from the shadows, and now they were aware of the true threat humanity posed. They too would have to be dealt with. Clark's thoughts were interrupted by the comm officer, Lieutenant Shaw. The Lyrian Federation has issued a statement, Admiral. They're calling for a ceasefire and requesting immediate negotiations. Clark didn't need to think twice. He knew what was coming. The Lyrians would be desperate now, realizing that humanity would not pick sides, but would destroy anyone who posed a threat to peace. The human message had been made clear. We do not fight your war, but we will stop it if we must. And now it was time for the galaxy to reckon with the consequences of their actions. Clark's eyes narrowed as he turned to his crew. Prepare the ship for departure, he said quietly. We've made our point. Now we wait for the galaxy to decide if it wants peace or destruction. But no matter the outcome, humanity will not be drawn into their endless conflict. The Vanguard slowly turned its engines, firing up and leaving the wreckage behind as it sailed toward the unknown future ahead of them. The message had been sent. The galaxy had been warned. And now it was humanity's time to watch from the sidelines as others chose their fate, and the Vanguard would be there waiting should the need to intervene arise again.